You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. The Chris Voss Show. Welcome to the big show, my friends. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for tuning in. As always, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Put your arm around them and say, join the family that loves you but doesn't judge you. The Chris Voss Show. The best kind of love. Is it true love? I don't know if it's true love, but we do love you. I don't know if it's true love or if it's just kind of a convenient love, but I'll let you make up your mind on what you think about it. But hopefully you love the show and everything we do here. We always have the brilliantest minds on the show and things that will make you smarter. And as everyone knows, the smarter you are, the sexier you are. Plus, the more happy you are with life. And happiness is a joy to have, because it's sometimes fleeting in life. Anyway, guys, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Go to LinkedIn, all the groups on LinkedIn, or LinkedIn newsletter, all those places across the internet. The Chris Voss Show operates at. We have another amazing gentleman on the show. He's a brilliant mind who's going to expand your mind so much you may need to order an expanded cranium on Amazon. You can actually get that. There's an aisle for it. He is the author of the newest book to come out October 2nd, 2021, Our Fourth Age, a village elder's story for young homines sapientes after surviving their future history. We'll get talking about what that title means and everything else. Mr. Terry Vernon Thiele is on the show with us today. He's going to be talking to us about his book. He is been for over 40 years experience helping government officials, corporate officers, and graduate students think about the future. He served in the U.S. Treasury, CIA, DIA, and the Executive Office of the President, and his work for GE, AB Electrolux, and Berkshire Hathaway's Lubrizol Corporation. Terry has taught strategy and innovation at several universities and business schools. He's received his BA magna cum laude in the history for Princeton and Juris Doctorate from NYU School of Law. If I can learn to pronounce things this morning, that would be great. He is a graduate of the National War College and has authored a book examining how we got to where we are and what it might mean for the future survivability of our species. His current book is out now. Welcome to the show, Terry. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show and having us with you as on your Brilliant Books interview. Give us your .com so people can find you on those interwebages in the sky.
Well, frankly, the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn.
There you go. Do you want to give that .com? Do you know the .com off the top of your head?
TV Thiele, TVTHIELE at LinkedIn.com.
There you go. So what motivated you want to write this book? Is this your first book, Terry?
It is, and it was about 40 years in the oven.
There you go.
I spent the better part of 40 years trying to get people to think about the future.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout that time, there were some themes and trends that seemed to appear. And I finally got around to putting finger to keyboard and wrote it all down. Writing it was an educational process in and of itself. And I'll get back to that later about how the publishing process today is an example of some of the changes we're witnessing.
There you go. There you go. So why did you title the book Our Fourth Age? And then we'll need to get into what is a homines sapientes?
Most people would say Homo sapiens and think that that's plural as the Latin name for the species.
Mm-hmm.
When I sent the book out for comment to a number of academics, one of them, a classics professor, a brilliant gentleman, immediately came back to me and said, "Your Latin's wrong." And it turns out that the plural for Homo sapiens is homines sapientes.
Ah.
The reason I stuck it in the title, I dropped a footnote to it in the prologue, is a classic demonstration of how we think we know something when we actually don't.
Mm.
And in some respects, I think that's the story of our current state of affairs as a species.
Mm-hmm.
We think we know lots of things that we actually don't.
Yeah, the bit of the Dunning-Kruger sort of effect.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, it's it's amazing to me how many people live in these bubbles of social media and news. They kind of they just end up being what's the term that they use? Confirmation bias, where
Mhm,
where
exactly.
it just supports whatever sort of thing you believe, whether it's sane or completely insane or completely off.
Well, and again, there's interesting context for what you're saying. I'm going to back out and give you sort of the broad spread of how the book approaches our history as a species. As the title suggests, I would suggest that we are entering our fourth age.
Hmm.
Now, the first age, I'd argue, is go back 200,000 years, thereabouts. And when we first became anatomically modern,
Hmm.
okay, and we were hunter-gatherers on the savannah. Roll the clock forward to, let's say, 12,000 BC.
Hmm.
And at that juncture, we evolved into farmers and herders. That's our second age.
Isn't that called the pre-McDonald's age? The pre-Big Mac age? I think that's the scientific term for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go forward again to, I'll pick a date, 1785. Why that date? Well, that's about the time that steam engines became commercially available
Mm-hmm.
and were reliable. And that jump in energy production powered us into the third age of mass production, where we made things. We were manufacturers.
That's the Big Mac age then. Yeah.
The Big Mac.
Quarter
yes.
pounder age, I think. Fries.
And I picked 2020 with COVID as sort of the jump off for what I'll call the fourth age.
Huh. That's interesting. Why do
And I'm characterizing the fourth age, the justification for it is based upon what I would argue are dramatic societal and technological changes,
Hmm.
the like of which our species has never before experienced.
Well, that was definitely something that was a huge change. And how many just for conversation's sake, do we have more ages after the fourth age? I'm just kind of
Yes,
curious.
actually, I'm working on the fifth age, assuming we survive the fourth.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about.
And but we'll get to that in a little bit.
All right, we'll stick with one age at a time.
Let's talk a bit about the fourth age.
We have enough
What
trouble
societal
doing that.
changes are we talking about? Well,
Mhm.
I would argue that for what the data tells us is that for the first time ever, more people live in cities than in the country. For the first time ever. When you look at the demographics of the world, everybody's concerned about overpopulation. Well, if you look at the data, half of the countries of the world are not reproducing themselves.
Mm.
Japan, Korea,
Mm.
Eastern Europe are forecast to be losing 40% of their population.
China just crossed that threshold too.
China has reached its peak population,
Mhm.
and it is getting older and
Mhm.
smaller.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, when you speak about India and China, India is still growing, but they both have a major issue that other countries don't have. For cultural and legal reasons in the two countries, for decades, they have been self-selecting male babies over female babies.
Mhm.
So in China, you've got 25 million Chinese men for which there are no Chinese women.
Yeah.
And in India, I want to say it's above 60 million Indian men for which there are no Indian women.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at social disruption, not only are shrinking populations disruptive, but that there's a heck of a lot of unrequited testosterone involved in those two countries.
Oh, yeah.
95% of the population increase that the UN is forecasting between now and the end of the century is all Africa.
Wow.
Some of those countries, I want to say Nigeria, I'd have to go look at the data, are forecast to grow up to 450%.
In Africa.
So when you look at huge population increases, huge population decreases, and urbanization, we are going through dramatic changes that we have never seen before. And I would argue that that my grandchildren, any child born now, is in a unique position compared to any child born previously. Because any child for the past 200,000 years could look at their parents and their grandparents and say, my life is going to look something like that. I don't think that's true anymore. And partly because of societal change, but also partly because of technological change.
Yeah.
When you look at what is going on in terms of 3D printing, artificial intelligence, the internet, synthetic biology, nanotechnology, cheap, ubiquitous off-grid energy, and there are several other disruptive technologies. They are all coming to commercialization at the same time. Mm-hmm. What that means is we are going from a third age global economic model of a few making many to a fourth age economic model of many making a few.
Wow.
And what that means is most of the economic criteria that businesses have used to measure success, economies of scale, inventory, barriers to entry. Mm-hmm. Well, with 3D printing and new materials and instantaneous communication, those barriers to entry go away. Anyone can compete with anyone. So the traditional model of where you made 80% of your revenue off of 20% of your SKUs, that's flattened out. You make 100% off of 100% because the model of economic performance is going to be very different. Now, it's not everywhere all at once, but it's the old quote, the future's here, it's just unevenly distributed.
Oh, wow.
So you're seeing it in certain aspects, and the most obvious is with music and publishing. This is Christensen's long tail, where the internet and computers have enabled a revolution in how music is made, sold, distributed. Netflix versus Errol's, if you remember VHS tapes.
Yeah, I definitely do.
Yeah, and so I'm getting back to my book. When I was first writing the book, I thought, I'll go find an agent, and the agent will help me go find a publishing company, and the publishing house will, make my book a New York Times bestseller. And I rapidly discovered that agents are only interested in you if you have already published or you already have a large social media following.
Yeah.
Neither of which I had. I luckily had a colleague of mine who was in the process of writing his first book, and he was about 6 months ahead of me. So he mentored me through the process. Both of us self-published on Amazon. I want to say 85% of the books that are published today are self-published. published.
Yeah, I would believe it.
And it is a fundamental revolution in the publishing world. It's an entirely different approach.
Mm-hmm.
So in any event, getting back to that fourth age and that disruption between society and technology, and then the question is, well, how well are we managing it? Well, from a business standpoint, I'd point out that the average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company in 1935 was 90 years. And in 2016, it's 18.
Wow. That is amazing, man.
In 1970 to 2015, the average lifespan of all publicly traded companies nearly halved. So what that data tells me is that modern business is confronting problems it can't solve. Now, on the political side,
before we switch to political, what's the impetus behind that? Is it because change is moving faster or innovation is moving faster?
The
what's
rate
that law
of change, the rate and degree of change are accelerating to the point where if you aren't thinking about the problem with strategic planning, geez, I did strategic planning for decades for companies. And I think the patron saint of planners, you see a copy of my book in the background, and the screaming lady on the cover, that is Cassandra, who was the daughter of Priam, the king of Troy. Cassandra was the priestess of Apollo. Apollo approached her seeking sexual favors, which she refused him. And he cursed Cassandra with the ability to foretell the future that she could not, that no one would believe, and she could not change.
Sounds like
that's the patron saint for strategic planners. You work with a company and you say, yeah, and they don't believe you, and nothing happens.
You gotta love it.
But that rate of change is demonstrated by a book that came out 2019 by a Swedish physician, Hans Rosling. The book is called Factfulness. In fact, it's right there. And Rosling had gone, he was troubled by what he was seeing in terms of people he was talking to who didn't seem to really understand the state of the world. And so he went to Davos in 2015, and he had a series of generic questions about the state of the world. Basic information that you would think that the people who are setting policy and direction would know. Okay. He then went in 2017 and polled 12,000 people in 14 different countries. So he has a very large basis for this analysis. And I'll give you an example of one of the questions. And all of the questions had three answers, A, B, or C. They could pick. In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has A, almost doubled, B, remained more or less the same, or C, almost halved. 93% of the 12,000 got that wrong.
Wow.
39% of the attendees at Davos got it wrong. The answer was C, almost halved.
Wow.
Now, the point being, at the end of the day, out of the 13,000 people, no one got all 13 questions right. 15% got them all wrong. And the average score was 15% right. Only one person got 11 out of 13 right.
Wow.
The observation that Ronsling made was, I'll read you a quote if I could. I have tested audiences from all around the world and from all walks of life. medical students, teachers, university lecturers, eminent scientists, investment bankers, executives in multinational companies, journalists, activists, senior politicians. Most of them also get most of the answers wrong. Some even score worse than the general public. A few of the most appalling results came from Nobel laureates and medical researchers. By law of averages, even a troop of chimps would score 33% on each 3 answered question.
Wow, that's offensive.
And we got beaten out by chimpanzees.
I've seen
So,
those people that can get beaten out by chimpanzees. I think I
yeah.
find them on social media.
So the point being,
I'm on social media, so that's a that's a kick at me too.
I'm a boomer. I don't, it's new to me. But the point is, if the people who are in charge don't know the facts, how could you ever expect them to set the right policies?
That's true.
Now, I'm going to go back to 200,000 years in the first age, because that's not irrelevant. We learned some fundamental things 200,000 years ago, instincts, which are still with us. And I would argue those instincts basically summarize, I'll give 4 common. The first of which is we are afraid of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're afraid of something, we tend to overreact violently. Secondly, we discovered that living in groups improved our chances of surviving and finding a mate and passing on our genes. So we are intensely social animals.
Mm-hmm.
Thirdly, we discovered that improving our status within the group further improved our chances of surviving and getting a better mate to pass on our genes.
Mm-hmm.
So we are status climbers. We will lie, cheat as a species. We will lie, cheat, steal, and kill other hominins to improve our status within our group. And fourth and finally, we're curious, not in any altruistic sense that we want to understand the divine, but rather we want to know what's over the hill because it might eat us. Those 4 instincts still drive us today.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge we're facing in the 4th age is the rate and degree of change are coming at us so fast
Mm-hmm.
that it's frightening. And so we tend to overreact violently.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we find groups that we think explain the situation
Mm-hmm.
for us, that give us some sense of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever the top person in that group is telling us to do or telling us what the state of the world is, we believe it and we go with it, because to do anything else is scary. And as we've just seen, the people at the top of these pyramids don't know what the hell is going on. They don't know the facts. And the rate of change is such that they're incapable of keeping up. Houston, we got a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's moving so fast, we're losing track. We're losing ground, maybe.
Well, the way we think, there's what they call the DIKW model: data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Data is all of the stuff out there, everything you see, hear, and all the information flowing around. And when you're challenged with a particular issue or question, you go through all of that data and you pull out the useful bits, and that's information. And then you analyze the information in order to figure out how to do something. And virtually every business manager is a knowledge manager. They know how to do something. Now, the difference between knowing how to do something and knowledge and wisdom is knowing what to do, not necessarily how to do it. And so we find so many of our leaders, our knowledge managers, who have learned how to do something and they keep doing it because they know how to do it and they're comfortable with it, and changing it is frightening.
Yeah.
There are very few people that take the step from knowledge to wisdom. And deciding, do we really want to be doing that? I don't know if that's a good idea. Maybe we ought to try something else here.
Oh, it seems we always go round and round. The one thing I always say that people have heard a million times on the shows, the one thing man can learn from his history is that man never learns from his history. So thereby we just go round and round, and we end up kind of seemingly repeating the same history and problems and mistakes that we make as a group of humans.
Well, just a classic example of how much we've changed. We currently consider dyslexia, autism, and ADHD as negatives, as mental incapacities that need to be cured. Well, it makes you wonder, why, where did they come from? Well, ADHD, or I should say dyslexia, I misspoke. Dyslexia was never an issue until we started writing. The ability to switch the letters, that didn't impact anybody before there were letters to switch.
Or something to write with.
And in fact, all three of those attributes, dyslexia, autism, and ADHD, psychiatrists argue they were critical survival mechanisms 200,000 years ago that better enabled a tribe to survive. Because the guy that can't sit still and is always fidgeting and going off and doing something is the guy that finds out what's over the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And the autistic guy that is really good at napping flints makes the best spear points. So what we've now classified as human frailties were in fact part of our survival toolkit.
Mm-hmm. And so where do we go in our fourth age? What can we learn? Because clearly, your book is trying to teach people, what our fallacies are and where we lack.
Right.
I mean, do we need to change course? How do we change course? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's the hard part of the book. And again, what I did is I applied some business planning tools. I did some scenario planning on what the world might look like. I think scenario planning is more valuable than forecasting because it forces you to think about scenarios that may be low probability but high impact. And whereas forecasting is just looking at high probability.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take a look at those from a societal standpoint, if we did nothing to change course, things don't look very good for a large portion of the world because of those societal and technological changes.
Yeah. I was just noticing, you talked earlier in the show about how China and Japan and other things are in declining birth rate. We're also in America in a declining birth rate, and just globally.
Well, but interestingly, one of the demographics experts that I've worked with, a gentleman by the name of Dick Hokanson, argues that this is the Anglo-Saxon century because looking at the data, he says that the United States, Canada, UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, of all of the developed world, we are the closest to maintaining a birth rate that will maintain the population. But more importantly, those are the countries where the talented ambitious, educated people in other countries want to move.
Yeah.
And so we tend to have our populations augmented by self-starting people who are willing to take the risk to get up and change their circumstances.
What about our marriage rates and our birth rates? Because those are in decline. In fact, massively, there's been this huge thing that's going on where we have fewer men going to college than ever before.
Yeah.
In fact, they have women outpacing them. And one of our societal issues that we have is women usually date up hypergamously. They usually date someone who earns more than them and has more resources and security. It's actually a biological thing for eons of time. And now we have the problem we have is, these young men aren't going to college, so their financial futures are likely going to be impacted. I know some companies are starting to change where they're, I think even an airline said they're going to not require a college degree for men to do stuff, but men have been kind of tuning out, and some of the social media things that have been going on and impacting some of the expectations of both parties have been delusional. And so they're not mating, they're not marrying up. I lived in Vegas for 30 years, and I remember the moment Vegas announced that, hey, people aren't getting married anymore, so we're not running 24 hours a day on our licensing. And I was like, that's an interesting sign. Especially when you consider how, drunk people get in Vegas and end up married.
Yeah.
And, a lot of things have changed, but the marriage rate's falling, and the marriage rate is, families and marriages and all that stuff is a key tax building block for the U.S. government and governments around the world, making money. And then, of course, a growing tax base, like we talked about earlier. So, are those things the stuff you discuss in your book, or have you thought through those sort of elements?
Well, again, I've been looking at the demographics with a longer time frame.
Okay.
So if you look out 10 years, you look out 20 years, there's always some variation from, 5-year period to 5-year period as to what's working and what's not working. The demographics experts that I'm not an expert in the area, but the ones that I was reading seem to suggest that between immigration and the general stability of Anglo-Saxon societies, that we're in a better place. Maybe we're not in the best place, but we're in a better place versus the rest of the world. I look at a country that's getting Russia's losing 14% of its population.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Africa, the average country is growing by 200%. Both of those are extremely destabilizing, whereas the shifts in our demographic profile, pro or con, are let's say closer to the error bars, such that we can socially we can manage them, whereas others in other countries are virtually unmanageable. And of course, it all depends upon how it plays out. If I had to forecast what I think the future holds in terms of what will save us, because again, we get violent when we're afraid, and there's a lot of scary things going on. The one thing that stands out for me, and it really came back to a year ago, my daughter-in-law was sitting there with my 4 grandchildren in July, and they were watching Christmas in July movies. So they were watching Home Alone. And Macaulay Culkin was watching a taped movie on a VHS player about some gangsters.
Oh, yeah.
And my grandson looks to my daughter-in-law and says, "What's that machine?
What is that?
What is that thing?"
What is it? Strange.
And she explained, well, back in the day, you could get a VHS player or a beta player. And what you'd do is you would go to a store, and when movies came out, they would ship to these stores these little boxes with tapes in them. And there'd be rows and rows and rows of these boxes on these shelves. And you could, if you were lucky enough to get there fast enough for a popular movie, you grab one of those and you rent it and took it home and you stuck it in that machine and then you played the tape. And then at the end, we have another machine that you would take that out, put it in the other machine to rewind the tape before you took it back. And my son-in-law, or my grandchild, I should say, who's a bit of a smartass, looked at her and said, "How did you live like that?" And there's a wonderful YouTube video of two teenagers being given a rotary phone.
Oh yeah, I love that
And
video.
I'm trying to figure out how to use it. The point I'm making with those two examples is our children, my grandchildren, grew up in a time where the rate and degree of change was accelerating.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, they have never lived without having 24/7 instantaneous contact with the entire world. And they have observed rapid evolution in technology, as well as intimate awareness of social trends and social activity. They are plugged in, clued in. They may not be any smarter, but they're more aware and they are more comfortable with change than I would ever be. I'm a boomer,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of stuff scares me.
Mm-hmm.
And so my hope for the future is that my grandchildren have the adaptability to cope with the change without becoming so frightened that they do the unthinkable thing.
And what is the unthinkable thing?
Well, I think we're getting close to it in Ukraine.
Oh, like war and maybe nukes.
Yep.
There you go. There you go. It's interesting. I think a lot of us assume that war was something of the past, and that we kind of lived in an age where there was enough balance in economic pressures to keep people from going to war, and we found out that we're completely wrong on that. There's still madmen in the world who just really don't give a fuck. So there's
Well,
that.
I was a minor Cold Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked in the government in the 70s and the 80s. And I'm going through deja vu at the moment.
Yeah.
It's like I've seen this movie before.
Yeah. It doesn't take much to spin out of control. And,
No, it sure doesn't. It sure doesn't. And and again, it's really in a way fascinating when you look at how technology is changing warfare.
Yeah.
And just the whole process of intel collection and analysis, the amount of what they call open source intelligence, OSINT, the ability to get satellite imagery of what's going on in real time on open source is just completely and utterly amazing in terms of how that impacts what we're doing. The problem is that the decision making that goes along with it isn't up to the task.
It's true. We're still making sometimes whole world decisions. So let's wrap up. And what do you hope people come away with your book? What do you hope they learn?
I hope people come away with some humility and recognition that what they are absolutely certain that their group believes and their view of the world is the right view might not be all it's cracked up to be. I would hope that people would step back and if all those people at Davos got all those questions wrong and we got beaten out by a troop of monkeys on basic facts of the condition of the world, maybe we ought to pay a little more attention to getting the information right going into our knowledge analysis. If people become a little more sensitized to the rate and degree of change and appreciate that. And again, I'm counting on the youngsters. I'm counting on young people who go, oh, yeah, I got this. This change, yeah, this is cool. I'm okay with this. Because I'm not. It scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, it's crazy some of the things that are going on you see in the world. We seem to be becoming more hedonistic when it really comes down to it, in my opinion.
And I think partly that's because we're afraid, and so we say, oh, what the hell?
Yeah. We just throw it out the window. So it's going to be an interesting journey, but hopefully people can read books like yours and learn from them, and hopefully make some better choices, educate themselves. You know, it's so important to discover the things you don't know that you don't know, because you know, as I told my niece and nephew, that's the one thing that will always get you. Usually, the one thing that always gets you is that one thing you're not watching for, the things you don't know that you don't know.
And it's changing so fast that can I give you one last example?
Sure.
Sustainability, climate change. Now, I'm not arguing whether or not climate change exists. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that to the extent that policymakers are concerned about climate change and they are implementing policies in order to offset it, they're creating and implementing policies for the next generation with the unspoken assumption that a third age Henry Ford mass production economic model where few make many is going to continue. But those climate change policies are not going to work in a world where many make a few. The policy implications, how one addresses millions of manufacturers making on their kitchen tables with 3D printers, customized products for their local markets. That's a whole different footprint and requires a whole different set of policy thinking than what they're doing. And this is where the monkeys are beating us out.
Yeah, the monkeys are beating us out. It's going to be an interesting ride, man, in the fourth age. And how long do you think this age will last, the fourth age, or does it just determine upon our survival and to that whatever the
it's
next
interesting. I don't know, but I do know. You had asked me, is there a fifth age? The fifth age of the book I'm working on is when we finally expand as a species beyond Earth. And we start populating the solar system.
Ah, there you go.
So once we start having reproducible populations someplace else, be it Mars, be it asteroids, be it the moon, be it space stations, whatever the venues are, what does that do to us as a species as we leave the place that established our instincts that we've already seen we still carry with us, and how does that change us, that fifth age?
That'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Well, it's been very insightful to have you on the show, Terry.
I've enjoyed it, and
hopefully you've given us advice so that we can survive until the fifth age. So there you go.
We can only hope.
that or at least you could do whatever you want with everything after I'm gone. That's my policy. I don't have any kids, so I'm not vested in it. But I'm sure you have grandkids. But as far as I'm concerned, if you want the place to go to hell, just do it after I'm gone.
I'm getting close to that myself.
Yeah, my dogs probably won't appreciate. They're like, "Hey, man, we're probably going to be around after you, you idiot. Like, why throw us under the bus?" So I don't know. Maybe I'll take them with me. So there you go. So Terry, thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs once more.
TVThiele, TV Thiele at LinkedIn.com.
There you go. Order up the books, folks, wherever fine books are sold. Our Fourth Age, a Village Elder Story for Young.
Or Amazon.
From Amazon, or wherever fine books are sold. Don't go in the alleyway bookstores, we always say, because you might get mugged or need a tetanus shot. Our Fourth Age, a Village Elder Story for Young Homines Sapientes about surviving their future history. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Be sure to see us on goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, and of course, youtube.com/Chris Voss. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe and get to the fifth age. We'll see you next time.